The night begins the way most nights in Brandon and Elise's household do, yet something about it hums with a barely perceptible tension. Dinner dishes are stacked neatly in the sink, the faint smell of roasted garlic still lingering in the air. Upstairs, the rhythmic sound of their children's soft breathing has finally replaced the earlier chorus of bedtime protests. Requests for one more story, one more sip of water, a final hug. Brandon moves quietly through the hallway, easing shut the last bedroom door. The house, for the first time all day, exhales into stillness. He welcomes that silence. The day had been a blur of work deadlines and minor parenting crises. A forgotten lunchbox, a spilled juice cup, a broken toy that triggered a meltdown. Now, with the children asleep, he sinks into the living room couch, shoulders slumping, muscles releasing a week's worth of tension. A single lamp glows near the corner, casting a warm pool of light across the rug. Outside, the October wind rattles a few stray leaves against the windows. This is his favorite hour, a small island of peace where he and Elise usually share a glass of wine, talk idly about weekend plans, or simply sit together in companionable quiet. Tonight, though that easy rhythm falters, Elise lingers in the doorway longer than usual. She's still in her casual evening clothes, an oversized sweater and leggings, but something about her posture is different. Her arms are folded tightly across her chest, and she leans slightly against the doorframe as if she needs its support. Brandon notices the way her eyes avoid his at first, scanning the room instead, like she's searching for the right moment or the right words. "Everything okay?" he asks, his voice low so as not to disturb the kids. He tries for casual, but the question carries a small quiver of concern. She doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she steps closer, the soft creak of the wooden floorboards loud in the quiet room. When she finally meets his gaze, he's startled by the intensity there, a mix of determination and hesitation that makes his chest tighten. "Brandon," she whispers, her voice nearly swallowed by the hush of the house. "I need to talk." The words are simple, but they strike like a sudden gust of cold air. He straightens, a dozen possibilities flickering through his mind. Has something happened with the kids? Did she discover a problem at work? A health issue? A secret she's been holding back? The look in her eyes tells him it's serious, whatever it is. For a moment, the world seems to narrow to the space between them. The refrigerator hum becomes a distant drone. The wind outside fades. All Brandon can hear is the quiet urgency in her voice and the quickened beat of his own heart. Without another word, Elise gestures toward the kitchen, as if the conversation demands a more private setting. Brandon rises slowly, feeling the weight of an evening that has suddenly shifted. What was once an ordinary night has transformed into the prelude of something he cannot yet name. But senses will change everything. Brandon follows Elise into the kitchen, the warm glow of the living room lamp fading behind them. The kitchen is dim except for the faint light over the stove, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. Elise moves with a nervous purpose, her bare feet soundless against the cool surface. Brandon notices how her hands tremble slightly as she reaches for the drawer beneath the counter, the one where they usually keep dish towels and spare batteries. Instead of pulling out a towel, she retrieves a small brass key attached to a worn leather strap. "Where did you get that?" Brandon asks, his voice sharp with confusion. He's never seen the key before. Elise doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she crosses to the far corner of the kitchen and kneels beside the old wooden floorboards near the pantry. Brandon watches, a chill running up his spine. He remembers helping install this flooring 8 years ago. He knows every squeaky plank, yet he has no memory of any hidden compartments. Elise presses her palm against one board and slides it aside with a low creak. Beneath it lies a narrow cavity lined with dust and a faint smell of cedar. Inside is a small weathered box of dark oak, edges smoothed by time. Its brass latch is dulled but intact, and there's a keyhole that perfectly matches the key in Elise's hand. She hesitates before fitting the key, glancing back at Brandon with a look that's both apologetic and defiant. "I found it months ago," she admits quietly. "I wasn't sure when or how to tell you. I thought maybe it wasn't important. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew we couldn't ignore it." Brandon crouches beside her, the cold of the floor seeping through his jeans. His pulse quickens as the key turns with a soft click. The lid creaks open, revealing a collection of items that seem pulled from another lifetime. On top lies a stack of sepia-toned photographs, his father as a young man, standing beside people Brandon doesn't recognize. Beneath the photos sits a tarnished set of old-fashioned keys tied with a frayed ribbon. At the very bottom rests a sealed envelope, thick and slightly yellowed with age. Brandon lifts the envelope carefully, recognizing his late father's handwriting scrawled across the front. For Brandon. His throat tightens. His father had died 10 years ago. There should be no more letters, no more words waiting for him. Elise touches his arm lightly, her eyes searching his face. I didn't open it. I thought, it should be you. The room feels smaller, the air heavy with dust and unsaid questions. Brandon's mind races. Why had Elise kept this secret for months? Why had his father hidden something beneath their kitchen floor? A memory flickers of his father's rare, faraway looks in the final months of his life, but it offers no answers. Brandon stares at the envelope, the weight of family mysteries pressing on his chest. The silence between him and Elise is no longer merely quiet. It is charged, expectant, like the air before a storm. Brandon carries the envelope to the dining table as if it might shatter in his hands. The paper is thick, edges softened by years, and the familiar scrawl of his late father's handwriting pulls at memories he thought had settled long ago. Elise follows quietly, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. Neither speaks. The only sounds are the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock, each second stretching into something weightier than time. With a slow breath, Brandon breaks the seal. A faint scent of old paper rises, earthy and dry. He unfolds the letter, his eyes scanning the first lines while his pulse quickens. My son, it begins, the words heavy with the warmth and restraint that always defined his father. If you are reading this, it means I could not tell you these things while I lived. Some truths are hard to speak aloud, but they should not die with me. Brandon's grip tightens. He reads on, his father's voice echoing in his mind. The letter recounts a youth Brandon never knew. Years before marriage and fatherhood, his father lived under an assumed name, Michael Grant, a life cloaked in necessity and danger. He never explains fully why, only that there were debts, a dangerous mistake, and people he had to protect. He describes leaving behind a small property on the outskirts of a rural county, a place where everything began and where something precious was kept safe. Brandon feels a shiver crawl up his spine. His father had been a steady, almost predictable man, an accountant who loved fishing trips and quiet Sunday mornings. Nothing in their life hinted at secret identities or hidden land. Yet the details are too specific to dismiss. An address is scrawled near the bottom of the page, along with a final line. If you choose to seek it, you will understand what I could not explain. He lowers the paper, staring at the grain of the wooden table as questions surge. What something precious could his father mean? Money? A person? A secret that might rewrite the family's entire history? Elise sits across from him, watching with cautious concern. Brandon, are you okay? She asks softly. He wants to answer, but words fail. Confusion tangles with a sharp sting of betrayal. If his father led a double life, what else was a lie? Childhood memories, fishing trips, bedtime stories, lessons on honesty flash through his mind, each now threaded with doubt. I don't know, he finally whispers. I don't know what any of this means. Elise reaches for his hand, her fingers warm against his clammy skin. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Brandon nods, but unease lingers. The address on the letter burns in his thoughts, a magnetic pull he can't ignore. His father's hidden past feels like a shadow stretching across generations, and Brandon senses that following this trail will change not just how he sees his father, but how he understands himself. The night around them deepens, heavy with revelation, as if the house itself is holding its breath for what comes next. The night has grown colder by the time Brandon and Elise step outside, the letter folded neatly but ominously in Brandon's jacket pocket. The house behind them is silent, windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. Brandon locks the door, the metallic click echoing in the quiet street. They move toward the car without speaking, their breaths rising in small clouds under the autumn sky. The dashboard clock reads 12:37 a.m. as Brandon starts the engine. The headlights cut a narrow path through the darkness, and the familiar neighborhood quickly fades behind them. Elise sits angled toward the window, her arms folded, gaze fixed on the blur of trees and streetlights. The address from his father's letter is 2 hours away, deep into rural farmland. For Brandon, the late-night journey feels less like a choice and more like an unavoidable pull, an instinct to seek. Answers before daylight can bring second thoughts. The hum of the tires on the asphalt becomes a rhythm that fills the silence. Brandon grips the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles pale against the leather. Questions tumble through his mind. Why the false identity? What danger had his father fled? And what could possibly be waiting at a remote property after all these years? Each thought flickers like passing road signs, gone before he can grasp it fully. Elise finally breaks the silence. "You don't have to do this tonight," she says softly. "We could wait until morning. Maybe bring someone else with us." Brandon shakes his head, eyes fixed on the dark ribbon of highway. "If I wait, I'll lose my nerve and—" "I need to know, now." She studies him for a moment. "You're angry," she observes. "Wouldn't you be?" His voice is sharper than intended. "My dad built our whole life on something he never told me about." "What else was a lie?" Elise turns back toward the window. "I was afraid you'd react like this," she admits. "It's why I didn't show you the box right away. I didn't know how to help you handle it." Her words sting, not because they're unkind, but because they're true. Brandon's temper, never violent, but quick and hot, has always been a quiet strain in their marriage. He exhales, the tension in his jaw easing slightly. "I'm sorry," he says after a long pause. "This isn't your fault." The miles slide past, landscapes changing from suburban sprawl to rolling farmland. Fog gathers in low pockets along the roadside, reflecting ghost-like in the headlights. The radio stays off, leaving only the thrum of the engine and the occasional whisper of wind against the windows. As they near the rural county line, the road narrows into a 2-lane path flanked by towering pines. Brandon feels a strange calm settling in his chest, as if the distance traveled has pared everything down to essentials: the letter, the address, the woman beside him. Whatever lies at the end of this midnight drive, it is a truth he can no longer avoid. Elise reaches over, her hand resting lightly on his arm. They exchange a brief, wordless glance, an unspoken agreement that they are in this together, no matter what waits beyond the darkness. The narrow road finally delivers them to a gravel drive choked with weeds. Brandon eases the car to a stop, headlights sweeping across a sagging wooden mailbox marked only with a number that matches the one in his father's letter. Beyond the mailbox, a crooked gate hangs on rusted hinges, leading to a farmhouse silhouetted against a sky streaked with faint stars. The structure looks forgotten by time, paint peeled to bare boards, roof lines slouching under years of neglect, windows black and unwelcoming. Brandon cuts the engine, and sudden silence envelops them. The night air carries a damp chill and the faint scent of pine needles. For a long moment they sit without moving, the car ticking as it cools. Elise finally says, "This is it, isn't it?" Her voice is barely audible, a breath rather than a question. He nods, gripping the letter in his jacket pocket like a talisman. They step out together, gravel crunching underfoot. The gate groans when Brandon pushes it open, the sound startling in the stillness. A narrow path winds through knee-high grass toward the porch, where a single rocking chair sits frozen mid-sway, as though someone just stood up and walked away decades ago. The front door yields to a gentle push. Inside, the air is cool and smells faintly of dust and cedar. Their flashlights sweep over faded wallpaper curling from the walls, furniture draped in yellowed sheets, and a scattering of fallen leaves that must have blown in through broken window panes. The house is quiet but not empty. It hums with the weight of forgotten stories. They move from room to room. Kitchen, parlor, a small bedroom, each filled with relics of another life. cracked dishes, a child's wooden toy, a stack of old newspapers dated more than 30 years earlier. Brandon feels an eerie mix of intrusion and recognition, as if some part of him has been here before. In the back hallway, a panel of wallpaper bulges slightly. Elise notices first, running her hand along the seam. "Here," she whispers. Brandon pulls gently, revealing a narrow recess in the wall. Within it rests a small metal safe, paint flaking but latch intact. He hesitates, then retrieves one of the tarnished keys from the ribbon they found beneath their kitchen floor. It slides into the lock with surprising ease. The safe door swings open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside lies a single manila envelope, thicker than the letter but just as carefully sealed. Brandon lifts it out, heart hammering. He opens it to find official documents, property deeds, handwritten notes, and tucked carefully among them, a birth certificate. The name on the paper makes his breath catch. A child's birth date from more than 30 years ago, father listed as Michael Grant, the alias his father used, and mother's name unfamiliar. Next to name of child, a single word, Samuel, a half-sibling. Flesh and blood he never knew existed. Brandon's knees feel weak as he lowers himself onto a dust-covered chair. Elise places a hand on his shoulder, her eyes wide with both wonder and sympathy. The farmhouse, silent for decades, now reverberates with revelation. What began as a whisper in their own kitchen has led them to a truth that reshapes Brandon's entire understanding of family. Outside, the first hint of dawn lightens the horizon, signaling the start of a day and a life he never expected. The first rays of morning stretch across the fields, washing the sagging farmhouse in pale gold. Dew glitters on the long grass, and a thin mist hovers over the gravel drive. Brandon stands on the creaking porch, the birth certificate clutched in his hand, staring out at a horizon that feels wider than it did hours ago. Behind him, the house settles with soft groans, as if exhaling decades of silence. Elise joins him, a steaming travel mug of coffee from the thermos she'd brought. She offers it wordlessly, her presence grounding him more than any words could. Brandon accepts, the warmth seeping into his cold fingers. They stand side by side, watching the sun edge higher, neither rushing to break the fragile quiet. Everything feels different. The revelation of Samuel, his half-brother, hidden behind an alias and a lifetime of secrecy, has shifted something deep inside Brandon. The man he called father was suddenly both familiar and mysterious, a caretaker who read bedtime stories and a stranger who once lived as Michael Grant, leaving behind another child. The betrayal is real, but so is the dawning understanding that his father carried burdens Brandon can barely imagine. "I keep thinking about him," Brandon finally says. "Why he hid all of this, what he was trying to protect." Elise leans against the porch railing, the morning breeze stirring her hair. "Maybe it wasn't about hiding from you," she suggests. "Maybe he was trying to keep someone else safe, or give you a chance at a life without the weight he carried." Brandon considers that, the idea softening the sharp edge of anger that had followed him all night. He realizes he may never know the full story, why his father left Samuel's existence buried beneath floorboards and abandoned houses. But he also recognizes a choice. He can let the secret define him, or he can reach toward the family it reveals. He looks at Elise, really looks, noticing the fatigue in her eyes and the quiet strength in her stance. He remembers the months she held this discovery alone, waiting for the right moment. Gratitude wells up mixed with guilt. "I'm sorry I doubted you," he says, voice low, "and for the way I've shut you out lately. Not just tonight, for a long time." Elise meets his gaze, a small, tired smile forming. "We both keep things in," she admits. "But we don't have to. Not anymore." The farmhouse behind them creaks again, a reminder of the past, but Brandon feels anchored in the present. He imagines Samuel, where he might be, what kind of life he's led, whether he even knows Brandon exists. The thought is daunting, but it's also strangely hopeful. "We'll find him," Elise says, reading the direction of his thoughts. "Together." Brandon nods, the decision settling like a calm tide. The night that began with a whisper of unease has become a morning of clarity. He takes Elise's hand, fingers interlacing, and for the first time in years feels the quiet certainty that their marriage, and his understanding of himself, can grow stronger through truth. The sun lifts higher, flooding the porch with light. A new day has begun, carrying with it the promise of reconciliation, discovery, and the courage to build a future unshadowed by the secrets of the past.